We've reduced the concept of health to something far too narrow. We count cholesterol levels, we measure blood pressure, we track steps and calories and prescriptions, and all of those things are important. But none of them on their own define what it means to be truly well. Because health is not merely of the flesh, it is of the mind, it is of the soul. And the tragedy is, we've created a world that teaches people to treat the body like a machine and ignore everything that lives inside it. Nowhere is this more evident than in the way we view aging. We treat aging like a slow breakdown of parts. Joints stiffen, skin loosens, memory fades. And all of that is real, but it is not the whole story. What about wisdom? What about peace? What about the still deep reservoir of perspective that only comes from decades of living, of failing, of loving, of learning? You can have a strong body and a tormented mind. You can follow every health trend and still lie awake at night feeling hollow. Because if you're not addressing the full spectrum of your being, physical, psychological, spiritual, you are not truly living. You are merely surviving, and that's not enough. Not for a life of meaning. As people age, they're often told to manage decline, to avoid risk, to play it safe. But here's the question. What happens to the soul when it's told, day after day, that its best days are behind it? What happens to the mind when it stops being challenged? When you no longer see yourself as someone capable of growth or joy or discovery? You see, the body may slow down, but the inner self, the part of you that dreams, that remembers, that hopes, it remains alive, but it needs care, just like the body does. It needs stimulation, it needs kindness, it needs truth, sexual health, emotional intimacy, moments of solitude, physical pleasure. These aren't side notes to wellness. They're central, they're human, and yet we act like they're optional. Worse, we act like they're shameful, especially for older adults, as if desire has an expiration date, as if dignity means pretending you no longer feel. But the mind suffers under that kind of denial. The soul withers under silence. When you ignore the psychological and spiritual dimensions of health, you begin to lose your identity. You begin to forget what it feels like to be alive on the inside. So what does it mean to pursue true health? It means asking yourself not only, am I mobile, but also, am I at peace? Not just are my numbers good, but do I still feel joy? Do I still connect? Do I still have meaning? It means treating your own touch, your own pleasure, your own emotional experience as worthy of attention. It means seeing your body not just as something to be managed, but as something to be understood and listened to. It means acknowledging that your spirit has needs, just as real as hunger or thirst. Aging is not just a physical process. It is a profound psychological and spiritual transformation. And it can either be an awakening or it can be a slow collapse into numbness. The difference lies in how deeply you're willing to care for every part of yourself. Not just the skin and bones, but the thoughts you carry, the fears you bury, and the love you still have to give. True health is wholeness, and wholeness comes from integration. From understanding that your value is not in how young you look, but in how fully you live. Life moves in seasons. Youth bursts forth like spring, wild and patient, overflowing with energy. Then summer comes, with its peak of strength, ambition, the full bloom of possibility. And then the autumn of life sets in, slower, quieter, more reflective. And finally, the hush of winter. A time of legacy, of stillness, of preparation for the great unknown. These seasons are not mistakes. They are not curses. They are part of the sacred order of life. But too often we make the mistake of thinking that as the seasons shift, so must the worth of what we feel, especially desire. Desire, emotional, physical, intellectual, is often misunderstood. People think it's something reckless, something juvenile. They think it belongs only to the young, to the restless, to the strong. And so as people grow older, they begin to suppress it. They begin to treat it as a problem, as if yearning for closeness, for touch, for connection, for stimulation is something to be ashamed of once the hair grays and the joints ache. But here's the truth. Desire is not a sin. It is not a weakness. It is a sign of life. It is the ember that still burns within long after the fire has quieted. It is the voice of your spirit whispering, you are still here. To feel desire is not to regress into immaturity. It is to affirm that your body, your mind, and your soul are still in motion, that you haven't given up, that you still want to live, not merely exist. We live in a culture that tells older adults to quiet down, to disappear into routines, to surrender to the slow fade. But that is a cultural lie, not a biological truth. The body may age, yes, hormones may shift, energy may wane, but the machinery of desire, and more importantly, the meaning behind it, remains. It may look different, it may not roar like it once did, but it doesn't die, and it shouldn't be denied. When you feel desire, it means you're still reaching toward something, a moment, a memory, a presence. Maybe it's the warmth of your partner's hand. Maybe it's the thrill of rediscovering your own body after years of silence. Maybe it's the hunger to be seen, not as a patient or a grandparent or a retiree, but as a whole person full of depth, mystery, and need. That is not indulgence. That is human dignity. What happens, though, when people are taught to repress that feeling? What happens when they believe it's no longer appropriate? They begin to shrink. They begin to detach from their own vitality. And over time, they confuse numbness with peace. They stop exploring, they stop caring, and eventually they forget that they were ever anything more than a set of routines and obligation. But there is another way, and it begins with honesty, with courage, with reclaiming desire as something sacred, not vulgar, not desperate, sacred, to touch your own skin and not feel shame, to yearn for closeness and not apologize, to feel the stirring of longing and recognize it for what it truly is, the soul's resistance to decay. So yes, the seasons may change, your body may not move as quickly, your skin may carry the maps of many decades, but that does not mean you are done living. That does not mean your heart no longer speaks. If you listen, if you truly listen, you will find that desire still lives within you. Quiet, gentle, but persistent. Because it is not just a physical urge, it is a spiritual signal that says, there's still more. I still care. I still love. I still am. And that, more than anything, is the truest sign of life. There's a quiet fear that creeps in with age. The fear of becoming invisible, of being passed over in the rush of the world. You notice it in small things. The way people speak to you, slower, softer, as if fragility has overtaken your mind. The way you're no longer the first name called, no longer the one people come to for answers. It happens gradually. And then all at once, you begin to feel forgotten. Like life is still happening, just no longer to you. But let me tell you something. You are not forgotten. And more importantly, you are not finished. You are still capable of joy. Right? That may sound simple, maybe even sentimental, but it's a radical truth. Because joy is not reserved for the young. It is not something that expires like milk in the fridge. It is not bound by the smoothness of skin or the quickness of step. Joy is something that belongs to you by right. As long as your heart beats, as long as your mind stirs, you are a candidate for joy, yet so many people give up on it. They shrink their worlds down to survival. Wake up, take the pills, watch the news, sit by the window, sleep, repeat. Somewhere along the way, they stopped believing that their presence mattered, that their laughter could still light up a room, that they still had something to offer, something to feel. That is not aging, that is surrender. And it's unnecessary. You see, the capacity for joy is not destroyed by time, it's buried by disappointment, by loss, by grief, by a culture that idolizes youth and treats age like an illness. But underneath all of that, underneath the sorrow, the wrinkles, the loneliness, the spark is still there. It never left. It's waiting. Sometimes joy returns quietly in the form of a breeze across your face that reminds you of being 10 years old, or the sound of your favorite song, or the smile of a stranger that reaches you when you weren't expecting it. Other times, joy returns when you give yourself permission to laugh at something silly, to dance badly in your kitchen, to enjoy your favorite food without guilt, to hold your own hand and remember it still matters. And yes, sometimes joy comes through intimacy, physical, emotional, or spiritual. Thank you. They set boundaries, not walls. That distinction is what separates emotional self-protection from emotional maturity. Emotionally mature women understand that love doesn't mean allowing everything. It means allowing what is respectful, supportive, and healthy, and having the courage to speak up when it's not. They don't shut people out to stay safe. They let people in, but only with clear understanding of how they wish to be treated. But that's not selfish. That's self-respect. They've learned, often through experience, that having no boundaries doesn't lead to deeper love. It leads to burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. They've been the person who said yes too much, who tolerated too much, who stayed too long. And they've realized that love without boundaries is not generosity. It's self-abandonment. Now they choose differently. Now they choose boundaries not to control others, but to honor themselves. Boundaries to them are not about pushing people away. They're about creating a space where both people can thrive. They don't say, don't call me out of spite. They say, this is the time I need for myself, and I'd love for you to respect that. They don't say, you're not allowed to do that to dominate. They say, this behavior hurts me, and I need something different if we're going to move forward together. Their words are calm, clear, and kind. They draw the line with grace, not guilt. Emotionally mature women are not afraid of someone walking away because of their boundaries. They don't bend those lines just to avoid discomfort or conflict. If someone gets upset when a boundary is expressed, they see that as information, not a signal to retreat, but a sign that maybe the connection wasn't built on mutual respect. They don't use boundaries as punishment, and they don't weaponize silence. They communicate their needs because they believe in giving their partner a chance to meet them with understanding. They don't make their boundaries a mystery. They don't expect others to just know what's acceptable or not. They take the time to explain what's okay, what's not okay, and why. And they do it early because they'd rather be upfront than build resentment later. They know that silence in the name of peace is a temporary solution. Real peace requires honesty. They also know how to respect other people's boundaries. It's not just about getting their needs met, it's about creating a relationship where both people feel seen and valued. If their partner says they need time alone, they don't take it personally. And here's the truth. When you know how to set boundaries, you make room for love that doesn't require you to shrink. You invite in the kind of relationship where both people can be fully themselves. No pretending, no walking on eggshells, no over-explaining just to feel heard. Emotionally mature women don't build walls to survive. They set boundaries to thrive. And that changes everything. They choose growth over comfort. That's what sets emotionally mature women apart in love. They don't settle for relationships that feel easy but stagnant. They want relationships that challenge them to evolve, stretch, and expand. They know that real love doesn't just feel good, it helps you become good, better, stronger, more self-aware. They understand that staying in a comfort zone may feel safe, but it doesn't lead to fulfillment. And they didn't come this far just to feel safe. They came to feel alive. Emotionally mature women don't run from discomfort. They face it. They know that every meaningful relationship will bring moments of tension, of vulnerability, of difficult conversations, but they also know that on the other side of those moments is deeper intimacy. They aren't afraid of being uncomfortable because they've learned that discomfort is often a sign of growth trying to happen. So when challenges show up, they don't ask, how do I avoid this? They ask, what is this trying to teach me? They're not looking for someone to rescue them from their flaws or fill in their gaps. They're doing their own work. They invest in their personal development. They read, they reflect, they heal, and they take responsibility for their past. They don't expect their partner to fix what's broken inside of them. Instead, they bring their healing into the relationship, not their wounds. That doesn't mean they're perfect. It means they're aware. And they choose people who are equally willing to grow. They're not threatened by feedback. They welcome it. They know that love isn't about proving you're always right. It's about being willing to get it right. So if their partner says something is hurting them, they listen, not to defend themselves, but to understand. That's the difference between reacting from ego and responding with love. And they choose love. Every time. Comfort says, this is just how I am, take it or leave it. Growth says, this is who I am, and I'm always evolving. Emotionally mature women don't see self-improvement as a threat to their identity. They see it as an act of self-respect. They understand that the more they grow, the more they can offer to the people they love. Their growth is not about being better than anyone else. It's about being better than who they were yesterday. In love, they choose partners who challenge them, not by creating conflict, but by holding them accountable to their highest self. They're not afraid to have the hard conversations. They're not afraid to hear the truth, and they're not afraid to speak it either. Growth requires truth, and truth requires courage. They have both. They understand that love isn't a destination, it's a journey. One that requires constant recalibration, reflection, and recommitment. They don't romanticize perfection. They embrace progress. They don't look for someone who never messes up. They look for someone who learns, who grows, and who owns their part just like they do. Choosing growth over comfort also means letting go of relationships that no longer align. They don't stay in places where they're not seen or valued just because it's familiar. They don't let fear of being alone keep them stuck. They know that solitude can be a space for transformation. They would rather stand alone in their truth than be comfortable in a lie. Emotionally mature women choose growth, not just for themselves, but for the relationship. They ask the tough questions. They explore the uncomfortable answers. They lean into the messy, beautiful, uncertain work of real love. And because of that, the relationships don't just survive, they flourish. Not because it's always easy, but because both people are committed to becoming the best version of themselves together. They love from overflow, not emptiness. That's what truly defines emotionally mature women in relationships. They don't enter love trying to be completed or rescued. They don't search for someone to fill a void inside of them. They've already done the inner work to meet their own needs. They've cultivated self-worth, built a life they're proud of, and learned how to generate their own joy. Love to them is not a place to escape loneliness. They've experienced what it's like to love from lack, when you crave validation, when you chase affection, when your peace depends on someone else's approval. They've lived the patterns of overgiving, overcompromising, and hoping someone else would make them feel enough. And they've realized that kind of love isn't real. It's survival. It's fear. It's attachment dressed up as devotion. So they chose something better. They chose to fill their own cup first. Emotionally mature women pour into themselves every day. Through their routines, their passions, their friendships, their boundaries. They build a life that sustains them. They don't wait for love to bring happiness. They bring happiness to love. They show up whole, not because they've never been broken, but because they've taken the time to rebuild. That's the kind of love that doesn't demand, it gives. That doesn't cling, it shares. When they give love, it's not to prove their worth. It's not to earn something in return. It's not a transaction. It's a gift, a reflection of the fullness they already carry within. That's why their love feels safe, steady, empowering, because they're not trying to pull something out of you. They're offering something that already lives in them. And that makes all the difference. They're not afraid to be alone, because solitude isn't empty for them. It's sacred. They use it to recharge, to realign, to come home to themselves. And from that place of peace, they are able to love others more purely, without attachment or dependency. They're not looking for someone to give their life meaning. They're looking for someone who can walk beside them in the meaning they've already created. This doesn't mean they don't need anyone or don't value connection. It means their relationships are rooted in mutual respect, not desperation. They can receive love freely without suspicion. They can give love freely without exhaustion, because they are not loving to fill a void. They're loving to expand what's already abundant. In relationships, they don't demand constant reassurance because they've already reassured themselves. They don't collapse when there's distance because they're grounded in their own identity. They don't fall apart when things get hard. They lean in with strength and clarity. Their love isn't a plea. It's a presence. They also know when to walk away. Because when you love from overflow, you don't cling to what drains you. You don't tolerate patterns that shrink you. You don't chase people who don't choose you. You respect your energy too much. You protect your peace too fiercely. You know your worth too deeply. Emotionally mature women don't use love to escape themselves. They use love to express themselves. Their affection is not born from emptiness, but from abundance. That's why it uplifts rather than depletes. That's why it liberates rather than control. That's why it feels different. They love from overflow, and because of that, Their love is a healing force, not because they fix others, but because their presence invites others to rise. It's not about being everything for someone. It's about being everything to yourself and then sharing that wholeness with someone who's doing the same. That's what makes their love rare. That's what makes it real.